when a young drug dealer held himself for a first-floor window in fear for his life, little did he know he was announcing the start of one of the longest, most complicated operations in the history of Essex police. And more than just 3 years on, the cruel and vicious gang responsible for the reign of terror in Basildon and Furlock are now safely behind bars, with leader Jason Vella serving 17 years. Operation Max began back in 1992, when the police were alerted to a number of serious assaults, the victims of which would not contact the authorities and in some cases wouldn't even seek medical treatment. It soon became apparent that enemies of the 24-year-old Jason Vella were beaten and humiliated by his gang, who used fear to establish their own hierarchy. There started the long haul of gathering information, victims, statements and eventually suspects. The process culminated in 46 arrests, of which 22 were charged and 13 convicted. Of the 25 victims of serious assault seen by the police, only 4 chose to make statements. The details of their suffering were enough to make even the toughest officers flinch. Victims invited out by Vella for a drink were walking straight into a trap, where they were often tied up, beaten, burned, stabbed, scalped and humiliated. During Vella's hearing at maximum security Woolwich, the court heard how in one case victim Mark Skeets was lured into such a trap. Prosecutor Andrew Mundine told the court Mr. Vella began chopping at his hair, his eyebrows were shaved off and photographs were taken. He was stabbed with knives, he was burned with cigarettes, the soles of his feet were also burned, and he was forced to lick LSD-coated papers and sniff cocaine from a dog bowl. He was then forced onto his knees and made to take a dog bone into his mouth, at which stage another photo was taken. When sentencing Vella for numerous offences of conspiracy to supply drugs, grievous and actual bodily harm, and false imprisonment, Judge Alan Simpson said, "You set yourself up as a Tsar of South East Essex. You imposed your will on those who argued with you with torture and terror. There is not a doubt in my mind that many people have breathed more easily since your arrest." Second in command, Salman Randoldi from Chigwell, the Ring's accountant, was sentenced to 6 years and 8 months for conspiracy to supply drugs and false imprisonment. The other players were sentenced between 5 years and 240 hours community service. The trials of the offenders took place at Woolwich, Chelmsford and Snelsbrook Crown Courts. The last trial finally concluded in December 1995, when the main investigation was commended by the judge for its painstaking work. The background to Operation Max reads like a catalogue of torment and torture, the sort of gratuitous violence which even shook the most broad-minded. Many of the serious assaults brought to the attention of the police were believed to work for Vella and his associates but could not be proved. One attack was alleged to be punishment for not settling a drug debt amounting to a mere £40. Another victim was subjected to an assault by 3 thugs. After being beaten around the head and body with a large piece of wood, his hair was hacked off and he received injuries with a serrated carving that was used to cut his leg. Whilst laying injured, he claimed he heard his attackers discussing to set him alight. In another attack, the same victim lost his sight of his right eye for some 5 weeks, and he was so disfigured that his mother could not recognise him as her son. A 21-year-old had his head shaved and his hands burned with a hot iron and then ended up on a life support machine, afterwards refusing to make a complaint. On another occasion, a young man was found unconscious outside his Benfleet home and admitted to intensive care with several head and facial injuries. During the assault, the victim had a kettle of boiling water poured over his arm, and another was stripped naked, forced to take in drugs, beaten and then thrown into a lake. Other injuries sustained by victims including broken arms, severe slashed faces and knees damaged by hammers. These all thought to be linked but never went to court. Unemployed since school, with no known legal source of income or claim to benefit, Vella still maintained a lifestyle which would be the envy of most. Fast cars, mobile phones and overseas holidays were a constant feature of his way of life. On one occasion, 5 men, including Vella, flew first class to Las Vegas to watch a Lennox Lewis title fight. Whilst they were there, they took it upon themselves to hire a helicopter for a tour over the Grand Canyon. Woolwich Court was told how one of the accountants booked, kept by co-defendant Simon Rendella, revealed details amounting about 1.2 million for a period of little over 12 months. Rinaldi eventually admitted the sum of 469,000 was the amount raised by him during the course of a year's drug dealing. James Skills, also unemployed, was found in possession of a drug dealing book which indicated drug transactions to a value of 45,000, and Scott Hunt with documents indicating a value of 5,000. Neither admitted any links with the documentation, but both were found guilty. Young students were often the target for Vella and his ruthless associates, impressed by their money, fast cars and nice clothes. Schools and sixth form colleges in the southeast Essex area soon became an attraction for Vella. Not only would he push drugs, but he would use and frighten the more gullible youngsters into working as small-time dealers, and there were many naive girls who would jump at free trips to Paris and meals in top-class restaurants. Vella was the last to stop and think about the impact on the lives of these students and their families. The success of Operation Max, according to Detective Superintendent David Bright, is due entirely to the determination and dedication of the officers involved in the investigation. Mr. Bright worked on the inquiry for its duration, taking over from Detective Superintendent Malcolm Hargreaves on his retirement. He explained, "My objective was to gather evidence, arrest and charge Jason Vella with as many offences as possible, whatever the crime, and get him arraigned before a court. As a bonus, I wanted to get as many of the hard men in the same situation." It wasn't an easy task. In fact, it was difficult beyond belief. Many men we believed to be victims would not talk to us out of fear of retribution, going to such lengths as moving home and instructing solicitors to write on their behalf, recording the fact that they would not speak to the police about their injuries, not the normal course of action of a victim of a serious assault. The situation for those victims who did not make statements led to a witness protection program, which eventually provided 4 victims with new identities and accommodation relocation, an enormous drain on manpower. Said Mr. Bright, "We had to convince the victims that we would not fail them and would do all in our power to stand by them. Prosecution programs have been used in the past, but not on this scale. It is expensive and time consuming, but I would have extended it to more witnesses if the need was required. Money and manpower should never stand in the way of protecting people to ensure that justice is carried out. But while the number of convictions and lengths of sentences sings out success, there is still a hint of regret as the ones who got away. Obviously, I and the Max team members are disappointed that the juries in some cases found for the defendant a regret for the cases lost. But at the end of the day, all that could be done was done. The officers engaged in the investigation could not have worked harder or done any more to encourage or persuade victims to make statements. But sight must not be lost of the fact that fear is a very powerful weapon, and Jason Vella and the cowardly thugs he ran with traded in fear to a frightening effect. These people thought they were invincible, but Operation Max has shown that commitment and professional skill displayed by police officers can prove to the likes of Vella and his associates that they are not above the law. The success of this investigation owes much to the calibre of the officers involved. Not only detectives, but ununiformed officers and excellent support received from civilian staff. The end results reflect the hard work of all concerned. And then, in 2006, Jason Vella found himself again arrested for blackmail and interfering with a witness, but in 2007, he was later acquitted of both charges.